All right, welcome in everyone, diving back into the deep dive. Looks like we've got another great stack of sources here, all focused on, well, a pretty legendary book, I gotta say. Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea.
Definitely a heavyweight in the literary world.
Oh, yeah. So our mission, if you will, for this deep dive is to, go beyond that surface level. Everyone kind of knows the basic story, but we want to see what our sources are saying about why this one stuck around, why is it a classic, what makes it tick. And I think what's really interesting here is we've got some different angles, different perspectives on this thing, so it should make for a lively discussion.
For sure. I think sometimes when we think about, diving into literary analysis, it can feel a bit daunting. Like we're back in English class trying to decipher some hidden meaning.
Right, right. But I think what we've got here is going to be much more engaging. We're really focusing on the elements that give this book its lasting power, the stuff that really makes it resonate. So, without further ado, why don't we just jump right in?
Sounds good to me. And I got to say, one of our sources just got straight to the chase with a question that's so fundamental. What are the qualities of the old man in the sea that make it, as they put it, a great masterpiece of literary art?
Straight to the point, huh?
Yeah, no messing around.
So let's unpack that because this source goes on to make a pretty bold claim, doesn't it? It argues that the book's classic status, why it's considered such a significant piece of literature, stems from this supreme excellence.
Yeah.
That's their word in all its different aspects, and it also mentions this profound significance, this deep meaning that makes it sort of timeless, I guess.
Right, timeless. And it ties this idea of being a great book to, a few specific areas. They talk about the structure, the way the characters are portrayed, how it achieves realism, and then, of course, Hemingway's distinctive style.
Yeah, yeah. And I think those four areas, those provide a pretty solid roadmap for us to follow, right? A good way to break this whole thing down.
Totally agree. And I think it makes sense to start with that structure because one of our sources really emphasizes how tightly organized it is, how compact and deliberate.
Yeah, it's like every sentence, every scene, it's there for a reason. No fluff, no digressions, just pure, focused storytelling.
Right. And it highlights these four distinct movements. We've got the old man and the boy, that establishes their bond right at the start. Then we're plunged into the central struggle with the Marlin, that incredible battle, and the old man's victory there. But then, of course, the sharks come in and it's a whole other fight and, well, ultimately a defeat for Santiago.
Yeah, that's a rough one. But then, the source points out that last part, the epilogue, where he returned home and we get that final scene with the fisherman talking. It's almost like this quiet reflection after all that intense action.
And I think it's in that streamlined structure that the symbolic layers really start to resonate. Because as one source makes clear, this isn't just about an old fisherman and his catch. It's about the undefeated man, about this idea of moral victory, even in the face of defeat.
Yeah, and I think the structure itself, those stages of struggle, victory, loss, reflection, it kind of mirrors that broader human experience. It's
Yeah.
like we can all relate to that on some level.
Absolutely. And there's one more detail about the structure that I think is worth mentioning. The source actually draws attention to the imagery of the crucifixion.
Whoa, okay, that's interesting. So like connecting Santiago's suffering to, something with that kind of religious significance.
Exactly. It's like his pain goes beyond the physical. It represents this deeper struggle, like a Christ-like endurance, a sacrifice, and it adds a whole other layer to how we understand his journey.
Yeah, that definitely puts a different spin on things.
Yeah.
So I guess that brings us to the character portrayal, right? I mean, Santiago's such a vivid character, so memorable.
Definitely. And the source dives into those key traits. His humility, his pride in his craft, his immense courage and endurance, and then that unwavering faith. It's
Yeah.
like these qualities are so essential to who he is and how he faces this incredible challenge.
And of course, you can't talk about Santiago without mentioning Manolin. That source really points out how, his devotion to the old man is so genuine, so moving.
Right. He's not just a simple sidekick or something. Manolin's a fully realized character with his own motivations and desires. It's that sincere love for fishing and that unwavering loyalty to Santiago that make their bond so powerful.
It's a real relationship, a mentorship, sure, but more than that. It's like they understand each other.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another key aspect that's often associated with Hemingway's work: realism.
Right. The man was known for it. And one of our sources actually brings up this interesting point. Given that the central conflict, this old man single-handedly taking down a giant marlin, seems pretty extraordinary, maybe even a bit far-fetched. But the source argues that the story maintains its realism because the human element, the emotions, the characters' reactions, they all ring true.
Exactly. It's like even in this almost mythic battle, Santiago's pain, his determination, his internal struggles, it all feels grounded in real human experience.
And that realism is further reinforced by another detail the source mentions: Hemingway's deep understanding of the sea and its creatures. It lists all these specific types of fish, birds, even sharks, and points out how their depiction is incredibly accurate, drawn from his own firsthand observations.
Right. It's not just some generic backdrop. It's a living, breathing environment rendered with incredible precision and detail.
And that attention to detail, it definitely ties into Hemingway's distinctive style. I mean, one of our sources describes it perfectly: simple, bare, unembellished, almost like mirroring the rhythm of the ocean itself.
I love that. Stripped down, no unnecessary flourishes, particularly in the dialogue. It's all very crisp, very impactful.
Exactly. And the source points out how Hemingway avoids those lengthy internal monologues, those elaborate descriptions of what characters are thinking and feeling. Instead, it's all shown vividly realized, as they put it, through action and sensory details.
Right. You can practically feel the sun on your skin, taste the salt spray, sense the strain on the fishing line. It's all so immediate, so visceral.
It's powerful stuff. So stepping back for a moment, thinking about the bigger picture, what kind of vision of life does the novella present? Because one of our sources makes this interesting comparison between The Old Man and the Sea and some of Hemingway's earlier works, where the characters were often more, disillusioned, pessimistic. It suggests that this book is more of an affirmation of life, a shift away from that earlier darkness.
Right. And what's really insightful here is how the source identifies this central metaphor, life as an ongoing relentless struggle. It argues that our usual ideas about right and wrong, good and bad, they kind of pale in comparison to the sheer intensity of this struggle, this fundamental human battle against, the forces that are constantly trying to knock us down.
Yeah, it's not about winning or losing in the traditional sense. It's about facing those challenges head on with dignity and perseverance. And even when you're physically defeated, there's this idea of moral victory, of staying true to yourself, to your craft, even when the odds are stacked against you.
Absolutely. And there's this interesting detail about the respect that Santiago holds for his opponent, the Marlin. It's not just about conquering it. It's about honoring the struggle, recognizing the power and the dignity of the creature he's up against.
Yeah, there's a mutual respect there. Even in the midst of this life or death battle, it's pretty powerful.
It is, and it ties into this interesting tension that one of the sources brings up. On the one hand, you've got Santiago's profound solitude, his isolation out on the sea. But on the other hand, there are these significant connections he has with Manolin, with the other fishermen, even if he exists on the fringes of the community.
Right. It's like he's this solitary hero, but he's still part of a larger web of human relationships. And that connection to the natural world is just as important.
And that source makes a really relevant point about how the novella's themes resonate with modern life, with the challenges we all face. Santiago embodies this spirit of resilience, this ability to keep going even when things are tough. It's inspiring, really.
It is.
Yeah.
So let's put this book in context a bit. One of our sources offers some interesting comparisons to other classic works of literature. It mentions Homer's Odyssey and Conrad's Lord Jim, suggesting that all three explore this theme of an individual struggling against these larger forces, whether it's nature or fate or whatever.
Right. That epic quality, it definitely comes through in The Old Man and the Sea. But then the source contrasts it with certain American classics that tend to focus more on community, on established values, on, fitting into society. And Santiago's kind of an outsider, in a way.
Yeah, he's out there on his own, but at the same time, he has this deep connection to the natural world, almost a spiritual connection, you could say.
And the source points out how Santiago finds a kind of renewal in his relationship with the sea. They draw a parallel to Thoreau's Walden, but then they contrast it with, Melville's view of the ocean in Moby Dick, which is much darker, more sinister.
Oh, yeah. Melville's Sea is a whole different beast. But with Hemingway, it's more nuanced, more complex.
Yeah.
It's both this formidable adversary and this source of life and sustenance.
Exactly. It's both beautiful and terrifying, powerful and life-giving. And, it's interesting that the source ultimately concludes by saying that while The Old Man and the Sea is undoubtedly a classic, it might not reach the same, like towering heights as some other major works of literature.
Right, right. But they're quick to emphasize that it's still a remarkable piece of writing, praising its moral simplicity and the impact it has on the reader. It might not be the most complex or sprawling novel out there, but it achieves something truly special in its focus and its exploration of these essential human qualities.
Absolutely.
So let's bring it all together. We've talked about how The Old Man and the Sea has earned its place as a classic, through its tightly woven structure, its memorable characters, its powerful sense of realism rooted in Hemingway's own experiences. And then there's his distinctive economical writing style, and of course that profound exploration of life as this constant struggle where, even in defeat, there's this potential for moral victory.
And I think all of that combines to create this reading experience that's so much more than just an adventure story, It gets at something deeper, something about the human spirit, about our capacity for endurance, for finding dignity in adversity, for holding on to hope and resilience.
It's a story that stays with you. So as we wrap things up here, I want to leave you with something to chew on. We've talked a lot about that balance in the book between Santiago's solitary struggle and his connections to Manilyn, to the fishing community, to the natural world. So here's the question. Thinking about your own life, your own challenges, how does that balance play out for you? Where do you find strength? Where do you find connection when you're facing those seemingly impossible odds? It's something to think about.
It really is.
Thanks for diving in with us, everybody. We'll get you next time on The Deep Dive.
See you then.